The question is well framed. Why did I become Orthodox? Not what was the process. Why is basically a theological, philosophical question. Backing up, I happen to be a recovering alcoholic with 30 years sobriety. People say to me, how'd you get 30 years of sobriety? I didn't. God did. Therefore, on your question, why did I become Orthodox? I didn't. God did. That is to say, I know he called me in, and here I am. Short version of the process. I was a Roman Catholic monk 11 years, left crisis of faith, left everything, and became a Quaker, a high school guidance counselor Quaker. Met a woman who was spiritually lost, just like I was. She became a Quaker with me. And we would go to Quaker services and Quaker retreats and so on. We married. Roman Catholic to please my parents, never went back to Roman Catholic Church. Continued as Orthodox. After our first child came along, Beth, my wife surreptitiously we lived in White Plains, began to come to St. Vladimir's for services, Vespers mostly. I didn't know it. One day she said to me, Al, would you go to a divine liturgy with me at St. Vladimir's? I said, sure. As if she had said, would you go to the American Ballet Theater with me? See Giselle? Sure. So we went. We came out. She gave me that feminine look. I know that's sexist, but true. She said, well, what did you think? And I knew what she wanted to hear, but I couldn't say it. So I said, it was good. She went flat as a pancake. I couldn't help that. So we just began I'll call it natural rhythm of going to St. Vladimir's one Sunday and a Quaker service the next Sunday. Beth is growing in this weird way. One Sunday I woke up. Usually I wake up and stunned, what's happening today? Is it going to be all at St. Vladimir's or total silence at the Quakers? I woke up and I had this awareness, not even a thought, certainly not a decision, just this, it was almost a yawn. It was like, it's time to convert. So when my wife woke up, I said, honey, I'm going to convert to Orthodoxy. And she said the perfect thing. Al, please don't convert for me or you'll resent me for that. I said, I'm not. I'm converting because I really want to. So I converted. But I was teaching full-time, tenured at Pace University, private practice as a clinical psychologist. I certainly didn't need more work, family. The next week, I get a call from Father Hopko. Can Father Paul Laser and I come up and have tea with you and Galena? Sure. So they came up, and I knew, and they knew, we weren't just having tea and little cookies. They were scoping me, and I was scoping them. I don't need more work. So we talked, and amiably, whatever my assessment of theirs was, we parted. The next week, Father Hopko gave me a call. Al, I have to go so-and-so and give a retreat. Would you give a class for me? Now it's a 2.5-hour class on prayer. I have a master's in Thomas Aquinas from when I was a monk, but I am somewhat familiar with Orthodoxy. So I said, okay. So I gave the class. And then shortly after that, the director of the Doctor of Ministry program suddenly died. Al, would you become director of our Doctor of Ministry program? Meantime, I'm teaching full-time. I have a pretty full private practice. Yeah, so I did that for a while. And in the Doctor of Ministry program, 8 required courses, 4 of them are taught by the director. So I taught 4 doctoral level classes and shepherded those students that I had. So I did that for a few years. I've done other things. I've been on faculty council more than 30 years. And I'm the resident clinical psychologist here and love it. So that's the short version.
Do you feel like that prepared you, helped you? And certainly you had the monastic experience. So what are some of those things that kind of
That's a great
help
question.
you come?
As a monastic, very much silence, which I loved. I also happen to be an introvert, so I meant that way. My wife died 30 years ago. I live alone in a little apartment, 2 children, 5 grandchildren. Was with my son last evening, overnight, in Philadelphia. But I love my time alone. I live in an apartment building with 160 units. Been there 15 years. I don't know anybody. I've never had any of them in. I've never wanted to watch a Super Bowl with anybody or play bridge or anything because I have all my people time here at St. Vladimir's. Then I go home, I want my solitude. So I have it. Your question about Quakerism, in a short answer, the word is yes. The Quakers were very formative for me post-monastic life as a transition to Orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. So I loved going to Quaker meetings. I'll give you one little example of Quaker meetings differ. Some are totally silent, wall to wall. Some have so they go an hour. After 20 minutes, if someone is moved, can stand up, say a sentence or two, and sit down. No converse. One time in New York City, at a meeting, after 20 minutes, a woman stood up, paused, and said, "Life is like a snowflake on the mitten of a child." She sat down. To this day, I can see that navy blue mitten, thumb end, no fingers, on a child, beautiful hexagonal snowflake, short-lived, as a metaphor for life. It was like perfect. So your question was, did the Quaker time help for me to prepare me for Orthodox? The answer is clearly yes. Clearly yes. That's some very fond memories of my time there. And to me, it's really interesting to, how do I say, factor in silence in life. One of the things I do is all my counseling sessions, I just had one now, and retreats that I give in classes and so on, talks, I always begin with a little moment of silence. Telephone, if I know the person, can we have a moment of silence together? Yeah, sure, Dr. Rossi. My daughter, who has 3 teenagers, happily married, I called her a while ago. "Sweetheart, can we have a little minute of silence?" "Sure, Dad." She called back a few weeks later. "Dad, I have a request. Can we have a moment of silence together?" So there's a certain sense in which it passes on. So I could talk forever about silence. My daughter says to me, "Dad, you can talk a lot about silence," meaning you may not do it so much, but you can talk a good line. But silence, stillness. I read a great quote by Huxley yesterday. Music, second only to silence, music is the language of God, but second only to silence. So it is in silence for me, for those I read, Father Hopko, that silence, Quakerism, is pivotal. I'll stop with that.
Do you want to say anything more about silence?
Do I want to talk forever about silence?
Maybe a bird's eye view. Say, maybe if I was a first-year seminarian and came to talk to you about kind of spiritual growth, and what might you tell me about silence?
Well, it's a really good question, and of course, that's my job. And I don't seek anybody to counsel. I don't have a little list, your turn. They always, "Dr. Rossi, do you have some time that I can talk to you?" Yeah. So we'll talk, blah, blah, blah. And then I will say, "Might I ask you about your prayer life?" they'll say to me, I'm doing this and this and this. I said, fine, I'm not your spiritual father and I don't want to be. But so I preface it by saying Father Hopko on the internet has 55 maxims. I knew him as a friend quite closely. And he wrote those for himself and then shared them as these are maxims that might help you, somebody. One of his maxims is every Christian, Orthodox and non, must meditate 20 to 30 minutes a day, meaning be silent. So I sometimes say that to a seminary, sometimes because they're very busy and they don't have 20 to 30 minutes, matins, vespers, and so on every day. But I will say to them, okay, I'd ask you if you could to try to do 5 minutes of silent meditation every day. Dr. Rossi, what's meditation mean? It's not rocket science. You sit in a chair, get very comfortable, be aware of your breathing, and to the rhythm of your breath, say some repetitive prayer, perhaps the Jesus prayer. On the inhale, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. And on the exhale, have mercy on me, a sinner. Calmly, serenely, repetitively. Then when the timer goes off, it's over. Don't assess it. Don't say to yourself, today was better than yesterday, or it was good or it was bad. None of that. And expectations play a big part in mentally in all of our life, whatever we do. So by way of expectation, to the extent that you can, don't have expectations for meditation. Just do it, because no matter how long you do it, 5 minutes or 20. I'm old, I live alone, but I do my 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. Guaranteed, anyone who tries silence will, on the side, St. John Chrysostom says, if you decide to pray, or pray more, or pray better, you rouse the snake within you. There's a dormant snake inside that is dormant if we're just la la la. But if we're trying to get closer to God, that snake gets aroused and is lethal. And St. John Chrysostom continues, and if you continue to pray, this is lovely phraseology, if you continue to pray, you lay the snake low. So the expectation is, I'm going to set my little timer and meditate as best I can, not think my thoughts, but give my awareness to God as best I can. But I expect distractions, and I can expect what I want. I'll get distracted. And I'm going to get tempted. And in my own case, most of my most severe temptations, I call them savage, are when I'm meditating. And all one does is one doesn't fight them or ponder them or even label them good or bad. Distractions can be good or bad. Just come back to the prayer and continue to do it. And the theology is that that time, as according to Metropolitan Callistus Ware, is transformative. It actually permanently changes the spinal cord of my character, the spinal cord of my soul, my nous. How that happens, we don't know. We don't measure it. Is it happening? None of that. But something really deep. So we become more ourselves. I live now, not I, but Christ lives in me. And we become more centered, more whatever, serene, calm, joyful. It all happens in silence. Now, there's a difference between silence and stillness. I don't claim that I ever have much stillness because my head is a whirlwind. But silence I can choose and do. And I can know that to the extent that I choose to do that, I'm going to rouse all the powers of hell against me. Father Schmemann used to say often to seminarians, Satan is real. He's not down on 42nd Street with the pimps and the prostitutes. He's got them. He's up here trying to get us by the throat. So expect major temptations a lot here at St. Vladimir. And they happen because I talk to the students and they're just always tempted one way and another, this or that. So that's what I would say about silence.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue to the next question, which is what have you found in your practice, and maybe particularly here with seminarians, to be some of the, well, let's say generally that way. What have you found to be some of the most substantial ailments that people today are struggling with?
Thank you. That segues into another question that you sent me, namely, what do priests handle greatly in confessions these days? And I do talk to a lot of priests. So they're similar. What are the great things here? What are the great things in parish confessions? Here at St. Vladimir's, mostly male students, some married, some unmarried. I love St. Vladimir's because it's like vegetable soup. We have people from Africa and New Zealand and Australia and Malankara, and they eat in a refectory together and get along fine. So whatever image I have of Orthodoxy United, I just walk in our refectory at dinner time and I can see it, a whole bunch of humans doing that. That said, your question, the most prominent, prevalent temptation, sin, addiction here, and for priests talking to males in confession, by far is internet pornography addiction and all of its subcategories, masturbation and all that goes with that. as an addiction, as something that the person cannot not do. I stop, I go to confession, I try, but whatever it is as a passion, force, carnal passion, is greater than I am. And of course, we have no idea what size or scope or intelligence these forces are. We're not fighting flesh and blood, we're fighting powers of darkness. So that's really where I would answer your question as the most prominent thing. And then, of course, so that's only half of the question. Okay. That's the problem. What's the solution? What do you do about it? And the answer in short form is accountability and transparency. So I've been at this decades here, and there's a group called Sexaholics Anonymous, SA, like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, that locally around Crestwood, there are groups within 10 miles that meet every night of the week except Sunday, and some morning, afternoon meetings. And I have sent a number of seminarians, faculty, staff, and students to SA meetings successfully. That is, it has got the monkey off their back. Some, ordained as a priest out there, have continued with SA in their local city, neighborhood. And the question is always, what happens if a parishioner comes? And that has happened to graduates. And they've discovered that this is really sacred ground, that these people are there to be rid of the addiction and get closer to Jesus Christ, and therefore are trustworthy, and it's a safe enough place, and don't worry about anybody squealing on you or betraying you. So these days, some of the students won't do that. So ratcheting down, transparency and accountability, have a couple of people, seniors, who are available to talk with other seminarians about this issue. So I'll make up names. John Senior. I have a first year student who's fighting into pornography. He'd like to talk with somebody. Can I give him your name? I never wrote female. And then have him call you a couple times a week and say how he's doing. Sure, Dr. Rossi. So that's like a little system I have working for me. And frankly, I don't know that I can't keep track of them half the time. But a whole bunch of students talking to other students, which is really what one wants to encourage, about not only lust and lust behaviors, but their feelings. And I'm just feeling funky and I don't know why, and I just need to say that, and I'm off center. Transparency and accountability, which many, particularly males, don't do too easily. And of course, that the great consequence of internet pornography and any sexual addiction is isolation, emotional isolation, which easily leads to despondency and despair. And the worst thing that can happen to anybody is total despair. And that's where that road goes. And I know of people in SA, 2 of them locally, who committed suicide because of this. So that's the series. So below that are other things, anger and so on. But the big one is that.
Yeah. In your book, Becoming a Healing Presence, you have a chapter entitled Gentleness as a Mindset. Gentleness is not something that's often discussed in sermons or theology books, but it seems to be a very important, maybe should be much more a common theme. Why did you make it a chapter in your book?
And I'll articulate it as best I can, but Jesus said of himself, "Learn of me, for I'm meek and gentle of heart," however that gets translated. And I talk a lot in class about active listening and define active listening as love delivered. And it is. But I would now, how do I say, use that language for gentleness. I think gentleness is love delivered. And frankly, I think in our culture, in our parishes, in Orthodoxy and all over, I think gentleness is sometimes present, mostly not. We're much more, in fact, I had someone say to me recently, "You're being very indifferent." Well, that might be kind of the opposite of gentle. It's like gentle is certain softness, it's certain availability, it's a certain healing presence that somebody knows. I mean, you just know if you're talking to somebody, if you're connecting, bonding at some deeper level, or if they're blowing you off and being indifferent or whatever it is. So as I didn't go back and read that chapter after your question, but for me, gentleness simply is how do I say, operational definition of how I'd like to be. Now, of course, I'm not gentle. I can be gentle sometimes, and some students will say that to me. I was with my son and his wife and their 2 little children last night, overnight, and they say that. But it takes an effort. There's a certain children of Adam and Eve inclination to, let's get on with things, let's do some problem solving, let's make this definable so that my time with you has some clear expletive outcome. We're an outcome delivered people, Western culture. So I don't have a whole lot to say about gentleness except that I consider it pretty synonymous with meekness. To the extent that we can, with each other. I think at least as a mindset, it's something that we can talk about more, can encourage each other more, can model more as best we can.
So in the same book, you have a chapter on vocation. And I was wondering if you could talk about what you mean by vocation and then what role vocation plays in the life of an Orthodox Christian.
Surely. For me, vocation doesn't mean career, and it doesn't mean monolithic, linear thing I do my lifetime. Rather, vocation is a day-by-day unfolding of what the Lord has for me to do. So some people, upon adulthood, do the same thing their whole lifetime. My dad. But some people, like me, do one thing and then another thing. I was a high school guidance counselor and so on and so on. So that's not vocation, whatever word we would use for that. Vocation is my awareness of my existence on this planet this day as given by God with a purpose. So vocation is purposeful living, living with a purpose. And my purpose is trying, as best I can, to ask the Lord, hey, what is it you want me to do now? And that now changes with each new now. And then doing the best we can with that. And at the end of the day saying, I'm not perfect. There are a lot of weak spots in my day, but trying to do the best I could with what I had. That's where, so it's all about Christ. It's about Him who lives in me. And I'm much more aware these days of that whole mysterious world as, for me, given by my little reading of Father Stanilu, the Romanian theologian who died not too long ago, who says, I mean, it's clear theology. I live now, not I, but Christ lives in me. Divine indwelling, however we understand that. But Father Stanilu takes it to a whole new level for me. I forget exactly how it says, but he says there is a dialogue, Christ in me. So Christ lives through my thoughts, moods, and behaviors. Well, it's not new. But for me, it means I'm a host. I am, some fathers talk about I, you, believers, are the Holy of Holies. We contain Yahweh, as the Holy of Holies did then, in Yahweh's fullness. I received the entire Yahweh on Sunday. So in that sense, I embody Jesus. And when I touch my cup, I touch my cup, but it's He who's touching it as well. And in some sense, it's He who's touching the cup, and I'm allowing Him. Do with me what do with my body and my thoughts and my moods. And, you know, it says that Christ was tempted in every way. So He was tempted toward despondency and fatigue and tempted to gossip and all the rest. We all have those temptations. So understanding that unity more has just been helpful in my little world. I live alone, so I have a lot of time to try to pray and think about these things. So my vocation is to try, to the extent that I can, to become more of a host, more of a conduit. And I have some metaphors I use for myself about this. So for me, this, and it's such a mystery, we'll never comprehend it. Well, you know, Father Hopko says union without confusion. He in me in him, one, but yet separate. But I think of it even in terms of like the dark side. A possessed person in the Bible was not doing those things himself. He wasn't beating himself with stones, but there was a force inside him doing those things. Well, taking that to its positive side, there's a positive force in me doing what I'm doing now and before this with a student, which is really the same sort of thing. It's Him doing some good through me, thank you, Lord. and then not getting any credit, mental credit for it. Oh, Al, you did such a good day. No, I let him have a good day through me. For me, that's a very subtle, delicate, but vital mental transformation from egotism to much more of a Christian point of view, something like that. Back to vocation. So that's what vocation is trying to live a life as best I can, allowing him to live through me and do what he does through me and get chilly when it's cold outside and all the rest because he's here with me.
Yeah. You were friends with Father Thomas Hopko. You knew him, obviously, colleagues, but also friends.
Dear friends.
Dear friends. What was the greatest gift that you feel like God gave the church in America and generally through Father Thomas?
That's a great question. I could probably talk for an hour.
Or some of them.
Yeah. The best I can say is the great gift God gave to the church, me and you and others, through him is his very humanity, his very presence, his being, because it came through. If you just listen to his podcast, as I did a little bit today, or Memory and something, there are videos of him on YouTube. He was a very complex man, by far the most humble man I've ever known. A man from Endicott who referred to himself as a peasant priest. And he really believed that. I mean, he just thought of himself as, and one of his maxims on the internet is just be an ordinary person. He saw himself as an ordinary person, often quoted his mother. But he was also a man who fought, sometimes unvictoriously, with anger. He certainly blew up at me at least twice, that I now consider inappropriately. But that was his humanity coming through, and he was just a very human being. But he was so bright that when he got his doctorate from Fordham, while teaching here, they wanted him to go on the faculty there, and he simply told them that he couldn't because he was here. He and I did many. So there's a program in Hellenic College called Crossroad for high school kids that I have talked at for the last 18 years. And he would often be the prime speaker for the June group of high school seniors. So often he would go Monday to Friday, then I would do Friday night and Saturday, and we overlapped. So we would meet at Bertucci's in Brookline and have a 2-hour meal and have no agenda, just meet and talk. Then go to J.P. Lick's beside it for a little cup of ice cream, salty caramel, his favorite and mine, and just talk. So there was kind of a relaxed, I like you, you like me, and we have some things in common. As you know from reading my book, he asked me to give a talk here to youth, which I did. He sat in the back, and I had the youth write out some things about their past and their history and their likes and dislikes. So he did it. And afterwards he said, Al, would you read what I wrote? And I said, sure. So I read it and gave him a little feedback. And then he just asked me, he said, I'd like to begin doing therapy with you. What do you think of that? I said, well, if we do it, it'll have to be on my turf, please. You need to come to White Plains. We're not going to do it in your office. So once a week for a year, he drove to White Plains for an hour, and I did therapy for him. Now, granted, it was more therapy for me than him, but you know what I'm saying. There was a certain, so he was my spiritual father. I was a psychotherapist, and we had a deep relationship. My wife, when she contracted bone cancer, he was her spiritual father. We went to a couple of New York Mets baseball games together. He liked the Mets. My wife liked the Mets. I liked the Mets. He and I saw a movie together with another Orthodox priest, Field of Dreams. separate topic, really good movie.
Mm-hmm.
So the great gift was his bearing, his proclamation by being himself, just wherever he would go. He was just a very personable fellow, got along with anybody, apart from all of his books and podcasts and wonderful things that he did. One little anecdote I love, a great sense of humor, but when he contracted a heart protein problem after he retired from here, um, up at the monastery in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, it became clear that his wife, he lived with his wife, that she could no longer take care of him. It was just getting too far along. So everybody agreed that he needed to go to hospice. Well, we know why you go to hospice. So they did what they had to do and got the arrangements made. Took a while. Then they said, okay, drive down. We have a room for you. Drove down. He was in a wheelchair, waiting inside to get the room that they had prepared for him. As God would have it, they said, okay, you have a room on the third floor. Let's wheel you up. So they wheeled him into the elevator, back toward the back of the elevator, him looking out. Then a man walks by, looks up at the dial, looks into the Hopko and says, are you going up? Well, the Hopko says, I hope so. I mean, he could have said, half dozen different sarcastic things. Why do you think I'm here? I hope so. I mean, that's emblematic of his sense of humor. He just had a really great sense of humor.
Yeah.
One time he got really angry with me, and I knew we were walking, and I knew he was in a snit for some other reason, which I didn't know. Still don't know. And then he just turned on me and he just said, I'm really angry at you because, I said, uh-oh, because why? Because you didn't recommend the book Man's Search for Meaning by Franco, and I know you know it, and it's a great book, and you didn't tell me about it. I didn't say anything. I said to
Sense of
myself,
omission.
yeah, I don't know what books you have in your library. I'm not, anywhere near your level of intellect. Who am I to recommend a book? I didn't say any of that. I didn't say anything. And then he went on and on about how he was angry about other things with me. I knew he was taking that out from someplace else, so I just endured it. But I was so upset, I went home, typed a letter of resignation to saying, Father Tom, thank you for all the things you said. I've no doubt they're true. And anyone of that character really is not worthy of being the director of your Doctor of Ministry program. So if you would like to have my resignation, here it is. So he didn't acknowledge it or accept it, and he never mentioned it as like non-event. One other little thing that happened that's meaningful to me. One year we had an institute at St. Vladimir's for lay people, and I was to give a talk downstairs below the chapel after Matins. And so I had a handout I was going to give to them, and I wanted to catch him because he had presided at Matins and tell him about it. He was talking to a woman, so I waited. And then I said to Father Tom, I have a quote I'd like you to please look over that I want to give out and talk. My presentation will be this quote expanded. So would you please read it? He said, no, I want to give you a quote. I have a book here I want you to read. I said, Father Tom, I'm due downstairs in 5 minutes. I have to give a talk. Just read this if you would. No, I want to read a quote to you. I said, okay, now I'm holding a pack of quotes, one for everyone. He opened the book, The Art of Prayer, by Theophan, and he read the exact quote I was holding. Now, I don't want to make more of that than is, but in all of the quotes in that book and of all the books in his library at that moment to me, so I handed him my quote, which is what he just read. We were both astounded. So there are a couple of little things like that that happened. You could just know God's hand in life. So
yeah, well, like you said, allowing him to work through us.
Yeah.
Be his hands.
Yeah, just let him go.
Yeah.
Let go, Al. Just stop one of the things I say to seminarians most is, you do too much thinking. I'm a recovering alcoholic. One of the things in the AA program, I've been sober 30 years, is I may not be much, but I'm all I think about. So it is true of me for sure, but it's true for most of us. We are very narcissistic, very self-centered.
Yeah. It was wonderful. I joke with people that I felt like I could follow him around with my camera on my audio recorder and just write, like he'd be writing books as he talked, just kind of connections, and everything he said was really interesting, and like you said, just a great mind.
Yeah. And you could watch the responses of many of the other people that he talked with, who were those open, could catch the light, and you could see the light bulbs. Whoa!
Yeah.
Couldn't feel the explosion.
Yeah.
But he really was a pretty totally non-judgmental person.
Yeah.
He just was. I mean, just, you knew it. Didn't matter if the person was brown, green, striped. Human being.
Yeah.
And he really, so in that sense, he really saw through God's eyes other humans. That's one of the things I'm fond of talking to the high school kids about. They really resonate that we don't judge others because they sin differently than we do. And of course, high school kids are judged often by adults for things they do, whether it's dyeing their hair green or something. So I can get much more mileage out of that topic than I can a coffee hour if I, as I did, gave a homily on that topic. And, adults, but high school kids just on fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't judge others because they sin differently than we do.